Good morning, y'all. I'm Kami Mueller with the North Carolina Republican Party, and we're here at headquarters this morning. We did a little bit of a test run a second ago, but our connection was weak, so we're going to start over again so that you can see this whole segment. But I'm honored this morning to be joined by Representative Marilyn Avila of the 40th North Carolina House District, and we just hope that you get to know a little more about her this morning, and I also hope to know a little more about her. So we'll just jump right in, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your family, where you come from.
I grew up in southeastern Georgia on a farm. Best geographic description is about halfway between Augusta and Savannah, Georgia. I was the oldest of four, had a younger brother and two younger sisters, and that came with a lot of perks and privileges, but responsibilities being the oldest. It was a very close-knit community. My family had been there for years and years, so probably related to everybody within 50 miles or more. And very good, small area. My graduating class was 22, and I lived at home while I went to college. Georgia Southern College at the time, it's a university now, is in Statesboro, which is the county seat. And I commuted, went to college and earned a degree in chemistry, worked in the field at a textile mill while I was going through school, and then was hired after graduation and was there until my husband and I got married and moved to Winston-Salem, where I was introduced to North Carolina.
So you met your husband in college?
I did. He was a foreign exchange student from Chile.
And, I did not know that. That is very cool.
Yes, he's a naturalized American citizen now, but came to the U.S. as a student. So I know the immigration rules inside and out because we went through the whole process of green card and then the naturalization to citizenship.
That is very interesting. It's an interesting fun fact I did not know. But tell us, of course, when a lot of people don't know, when you're in the North Carolina General Assembly, it's not typically a full-time job. It's usually a sort of a citizen leader position because of the pay, or probably I should say stipend, that is allotted to each leader. So what do you do, or what did you do before you started with your leadership here in Raleigh, and then what do you do now? I think you have other things going on like grandkids and wonderful outside hobbies, but share a little bit about that.
In North Carolina, what brought us to the Raleigh area was beginning a business in a franchise of hairstyling salons called Command Performance back in the late 70s. And we were actually living first in Winston and then in Miami due to job transfers and everything while we were starting the business here. But when we made the decision that we liked Raleigh and wanted to focus on our business, we moved here permanently in the early 80s. So for 10 or 12 years, I managed and ran 4 salons here in the Raleigh area. And when we moved out of that particular endeavor, I went to work for the John Locke Foundation, which everyone who's a conservative is familiar with as our state-based think tank, and was there in administrative position, served a multitude of responsibilities because it was very small in the early 90s when I started to work. I've done the telephone answering, database work, event coordination, balancing the budget, and making the deposits and all that, and paying the bills and that sort of thing. So that for me was a very good introduction to the type of issues and policies that I would become familiar with as a legislator. So it was a tremendous experience and preparation for where I sit today.
That's great. Well, tell us a little bit more about your district, if you can, what your favorite things, or the people. What are your favorite things about your district?
It's northwestern Wake County.
Okay.
It's geographically it's very large, but that's simply because a big portion of it is the airport.
Oh, okay.
So it covers a lot of territory, but there's a big segment of it that's not heavily populated residential or anything because of that. But it's like half of Wake Forest, the Falls Lake area, and it comes down below the airport into a small area of Morrisville. And it's got some very good attractions. You have your small towns, Morrisville and Wake Forest, that are just the epitome of small town North Carolina. They're just great. And of course with the lake, it's a phenomenal recreation area. So it has some very strong drawing points for anybody that wants to come explore northwestern Wake County.
Those are some of my favorite spots in North Carolina. I love fishing. So, tell us. You've worked on a lot of legislation since you've been in the North Carolina House. What are some of your favorites, or some of the things you're most proud of that you've accomplished so far?
Well, it's interesting because I had a sort of a preconceived notion because of my background in science and everything that would be the focus area. But actually, I'm a generalist in that I am interested when any piece of policy comes up that appeals to me or I feel like it's important. But I seem to have gravitated more towards Health and Human Services. I chair appropriations for Health and Human Services and also chair the Oversight Committee. And have found some areas that have been overlooked. Primarily, I think anybody in the state would agree that our mental health system has been in a building mode for a number of years since we changed in the early 2000s when we found that the theory of people being better cared for in the community was the best way to go, and pursued that. But unfortunately, we've been lacking for quite some time in adequate facilities and services for them. So we're in a very strong building mode for that in lots of areas. I know particularly the project that we had in terms of being able to establish psychiatric beds throughout the state, just simply because there's such a long waiting time, unfortunately, for a lot of people in emergency rooms. So those directions in mental health I'm very proud of. We passed the ABLE Act for North Carolina. It was a federal bill that Senator Richard Burr passed in Washington. And through our Treasury Department here in North Carolina, who's worked phenomenally well with us on that, this bill will allow people who have disabilities and are on Medicaid and various government programs to be able to save money for services that maybe aren't paid for by government programs, or save money for future expenses, which under Medicaid rules currently they're limited in terms of their amount of money that they can have as an asset. So now they've been able to work, which a lot of them can do and should do to the greatest extent possible, and be able to save that money, because one of the things that was just really heartbreaking was dealing with parents who were so concerned about what's going to happen to my child if I'm not here. Because in many cases there wouldn't be extended family or siblings who would be available after the passing of the parents to look after this individual. And I'm very proud of the relief that we brought to those individuals, that they can now feel assured that there'll be help and security for their child.
What do you hope to do going forward? Should you be elected by your constituents again, and we hope that you are, what is your goal in this next term or a couple terms?
I think I'd really like to build on this stable economic base that we're building for the state, in terms of revamping the tax system so that it's fair to everybody. It's a fine balancing act of taking money from one group and giving to another, because you can do too little and too much in either direction and mess up the balance and end up hurting everybody. So that's one of the things I'd like to see us do in building, for a lot of reasons. When we build an economy, more people have jobs, more people have less need of government services, and that's what they really want. I guess my background that I talked about earlier probably has developed my philosophy in how I deal with the General Assembly more than anything else. From the standpoint of the farm, when your biggest paycheck comes in once a year and you have to make it last for 12 months, you learn what the important things are and what the desires are, and you spend accordingly. As well, the farm is one of those things that the work's got to be done. They really don't care what shape you're in. You just do it. You work. They don't ask questions. Oh, this is a girl's job or that's a boy's job. No, get out there. We got to pull in a crop. So that was another early lesson, that I could do what I wanted to. There was no limit. And then from the standpoint of the education that I got, training as a scientist. Mother Nature keeps you humble, and that is, you can have an idea about how an experiment is going to work, and you can set up your experiment, you have your hypothesis, and you run it through, and it doesn't come out that way. So you don't develop a huge ego. You're very open to what facts are, how things develop, and be able to change your position as you learn what's going to happen. You can't change that experiment. It's going to be the same thing every time you do it. So your thinking has got to change. So that's why I work very strongly and very heavily with facts in determining if I feel like a policy as it's being presented is going to work or not. So that's those two things, I guess, are what drive how I evaluate different areas with regard to if it's a policy we should follow, if it's needing some tweaks, or if it's something that it should never be done, or now's not the right time. All of those approaches have to be evaluated.
So this is one of my favorite questions to ask folks, but what has made you a Republican? And certainly we have a certain platform and policy items that we identify with, but what has, in your journey, has brought you along to become a Republican?
I think it's just simply the independence that I was brought up with, that when you farm, you put your faith in God, that you're going to have a good crop, and you accept the responsibility for spending your money wisely, and you make it for yourself. And it's one of those things, so many times in the General Assembly I've heard people say, there's so much down here that's not political. And I tend to disagree, simply because there's a question that's got to be asked anytime we want to take up a policy. And that first question is, should we be doing this? You know, is this something that only government can do in a way that would be beneficial to people? Or would it be something that's best left to people in a free market, for lack of a better term, to describe the environment I'm talking about? Better left to them to decide how to do it or what to do with it. So I guess that's probably it, that we leave people in charge of their money as much as possible, in charge of their lives, how they want to be educated, how they want to educate their children, where they want to live, if they run a business, you know, how they can best run it to make the best profit to support their families. I guess that's probably the base philosophy of why the Republican agendas appeal.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. It was fun getting to know you a little better, and look forward to all you're going to do in the GA in the years to come. Thank you at home for joining us, and again, Kami Mueller at the North Carolina Republican Party. Tune in for more.